preserve us. The wisdom of God instruct us. The hand of God protect us. May the way of God direct us. May the shield of God defend us. And so, Lord God, what we know not, teach us. What we have not, give us. And what we are not, make us. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This house is in session.
Announcements by Your Honor. Messages.
Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, December 5th, 2023, and Tuesday, December 19th, 2023, to be confirmed. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
The questions that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Only first read on. Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions. Papers. Government notices. Sure. Private members' notices. Notices of questions. Report from select committees.
Your bills, sorry. Okay. There's no note.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Law Revision and Law Reform Amendment Bill 2024. Also, notice of the Barbados Revenue Authority Appeals Tribunal Validation Bill 2024. I also give notice of the African Export-Import Bank Bill 2024 and the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Bill 2024.
First reading of bills.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Law Revision and Law Reform Amendment Bill 2024. Also, the first reading of the Barbados Revenue Authority Appeals Tribunal Validation Bill 2024. Also beg to move the first reading of the African Export-Import Bank Bill 2024 and the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Bill 2024.
The question is that the aforementioned bills be read a first time. All those who are members in favor, please say aye. Those against? Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers. Congratulatory and/or victory speeches. Personal explanations. Motion for leave of absence. Oral replies to questions. Notice of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. Orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those who are members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Number 14, sir, on the supplementary order paper. Order number 14, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Home Affairs and Information, to move the second reading of the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Bill 2024.
Sir, just by way of clarification, it is in my name and under my ministry, but it will be presented by the Honourable Member.
Or the Michael West Central.
Yes, sir.
Honourable members to Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The facilitation of the International Maritime Traffic Bill is intended, Mr. Speaker, to make a number of corrections as would have been identified when an audit was carried out by the IMO in Barbados back in 2018. Mr. Speaker, it is not only about correcting legislative deficiencies, but is about creating opportunity and a window for greater efficiency within the international maritime traffic space. You may recall, Mr. Speaker, that Barbados became a member of the International Maritime Organization back in 1970 and is also a party to the various instruments and conventions concerning the safety and security and ship-to-port interface regulations and, of course, the protection of the maritime environment. The Convention on the Facilitation of International Traffic, known as the FAL, which also came into being in 1965 as amended, is an IMO instrument that seeks to improve efficiency within the shipping sector. Of course, within shipping operations, you have a number of maritime conventions, you have a number of maritime regulations that once you're a member you have of the IMO, you are required to follow. But this bill, Mr. Speaker, sets out to enhance Barbados' reputation as an international shipping nation. And when I go through the various areas of the bill, it will become clear, Mr. Speaker, to honourable members that this facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Act will also secure the establishment of the maritime single window system. And Mr. Speaker, what are the highlights of the system? It is essentially designed to prevent unnecessary delays in maritime traffic. It's to aid in the cooperation between governments, which is very important. is to secure the highest practical degree of uniformity in the formalities and other procedures, and of course, to avoid duplication. If we look, Mr. Speaker, at the bill, and let's take it back to a trade context. When a ship enters the port, it may necessarily be the end of the maritime voyage because they're here. But when you look and see that there are a number of administrative procedures that have to be followed, you would then begin to understand why it is necessary to have an international maritime traffic bill. There are a number of tasks to be carried out, including customs declarations, health declarations. There are also immigration documentation required for crew and passengers if you have a cruise ship, of course, their baggage, and other procedures that must be followed in order to facilitate the ship being in port in Barbados. And therefore, the streamlining of the inbound and outbound ships into this new bill will facilitate specific achievables under the Maritime Act. The file matters, Mr. Speaker, because of the documentation. And of course, the goal here is to reduce the amount of red tape that you're faced with. In other words, if we can have a system in place that would allow the ship agents, the shipmaster, or other persons designated in law to complete a range of procedures ahead of the ship's entry into Barbados, it would definitely speed up the efficiency. And that is what we're about, Mr. Speaker. So it would certainly improve the red tape, and it would definitely allow us to function in an international environment and, of course, be compliant with the IMO conventions. Mr. Speaker, you know, Barbados also relies very heavily on cruise passengers and cruise ships coming into Barbados. And a lot of what we have to review in terms of how we bill out the cruise industry in Barbados. Yes, we want ships to come into Barbados and allow those visitors to experience the island and, of course, spend some money because that's important and get us some much needed foreign exchange. But beyond that, the strategy has always been to go beyond the transient cruise call and to look and see how best we can improve home porting. This bill, as proposed, will definitely enhance the turnaround in efficiency and thereby allow for greater processing, both the embarkation process and the disembarkation. The Act essentially is designed to ensure that there's a fast turnaround of ships calling into Barbados, and thus this will augur well for Barbados as a preferred home porting destination. So, of course, it goes without saying that the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, that we support this bill because it will definitely enhance our cruise strategy and further build out the cruise strategy. In respect of climate change, the fact that you will have more efficient processing therefore means that ships will no longer have to stay at berth for an inordinate period of time. It will certainly reduce the waiting time at the berths. Reduction of fuel consumption, which is important because, you know, the IMO obviously is facilitating a more harmonious, climate-friendly environment. And these things, Mr. Speaker, will certainly help us. In addition to that, I may add that it will also reduce port congestion because if you have delays for whatever reason with the current system of all the paperwork that you have to do, that will impact on the ship's turnaround ability. Of course, we all know, especially when we have cruise ships in Barbados, particularly during the winter, that oftentimes the cargo ships may have to be in holding bay for some time. But with this new bill, what it does, in addition to what we're doing at the Bridgetown Port with the expansion of berth 6, it would therefore allow us to enhance the turnaround period and therefore have quicker ship clearances. Mr. Speaker, one critical feature of the facilitation of international maritime traffic has to do with the the maritime single window. It is a key requirement of the FAL Convention, as I said, by the IMO, and it also requires all parties to comply. The port has already built a system, a maritime single window for Barbados, which supports obviously the continued effective implementation of the FAL legislation. The port, of course, will support the IMO maritime facilitation requirements and obviously develop the maritime single window to address the inefficiencies of submission. Of course, we all know that if you have that system and it's prone to perhaps human error if you don't complete the papers, it could also again result in the delay. And therefore, the problem of us having reducing the number of delays would definitely be enhanced. When we look at the bill itself, Mr. Speaker, the bill sets out the functions required for a maritime transport facilitation committee. That's contained at 7.1 of the bill, where it says there shall be established a committee to be known as the National Maritime Transport Facilitation Committee. And principally, the committee is responsible for developing a program established under subsection 6 of the Act to expedite the clearance of international maritime traffic, which arrives at and departs from the port. The other critical component within the bill has to do with the functions of the Barbados Port Inc. The Barbados Port Inc. will have to design a program to facilitate and expedite the clearance of international maritime traffic. And the bill sets out all those requirements. It says at 9.1a, establishing and upgrading from time to time a maritime single window at the port, establish and maintain a monitoring, review, and evaluation mechanism to ensure that the procedures are simplified and that administrative burdens are reduced for ships engaged in international voyages arriving to, staying in, and departing from the port. Applying the principles of efficiency, security, and convenience. Treating humanly and protecting passengers, obviously stowaways who are on board as well. And the bill goes into all those areas, and I'll come to most of them. What is also important is that in the enactment of the Trade Facilitation Bill will also allow the Barbados Port to fully operate the maritime single window. The maritime single window will receive customs data from the Assecuda system, Assecuda World as they refer to it. The data, obviously, transfer mode is already functional and requires no change in the procedures as part of the customs arrangement. Of course, we have to pay great attention to security and information. All other information, such as the passenger and crew lists, will be received from the Joint Regional Communication Center known as the GRCC. Vessel operators, as we are well aware within the region, are legally mandated to submit this data to the GRCC. So those procedures are still the same for operators and therefore will require minimal change. The data from customs and the GRCC, will be collated and stored in a single repository defined as the maritime single window. Clearance agencies will review the information collated and determine the severity of risk to arrival or departure, and of course, employing technology. This therefore means that the vessels entering Barbados can immediately discharge cargo or passengers upon arrival alongside the berth. And for a vessel awaiting departure, this certificate grants immediate permission to leave. Of course, Mr. Speaker, we have to build in within the legislation, this what we've proposed, is also a provisional certificate of clearance. For example, if the risk has exceeded the threshold, the vessel operator must address all concerns identified by the regulatory agencies before the final certificate of clearance is granted. Of course, the maritime single window will also, as was created virtually. Of course, it's a contactless environment, which ensured that business continuity, which when we had the COVID-19 pandemic, operations of the port those operations were integral to the resilience of the nation's tourism product. The maritime single window, of course, as we all know, is online. It is immediately available to all authorized members of the relevant agencies at all times, and that it provides real-time information, which is absolutely necessary, as I stated earlier, in terms of improving efficiency and performance. But when we look at the objects and the reasons for the file, the bill itself, when we look at it, it sets out one that is meant to implement the Convention on the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic, Barbados being a signatory to it. Two, to make provisions for the electronic transmission and exchange of information in order to facilitate and expedite the clearance of international maritime traffic, to create an enabling environment for a port community system, and of course to provide for matters relating to the bill. Now, as I indicated, the FAL legislation applies to all passenger vessels as well as all cargo vessels from the coastal and non-coastal states. What is also important here is the issue relating to port state control. Of course, ships flying the flag of governments not a party to the FAL Convention when in Barbados will have to comply with the requirements of the Facilitation of the International Maritime Traffic Act. This is necessary because the IMO does not want, and certainly Barbados does not want, to have a situation where you have favored treatment for non-states. In other words, the IMO system, as is referred to, it says no more favored treatment for non-convention states principle. And that prevents, obviously, states that are a party to the IMO instruments and those who are not. It makes a distinguishing feature. So if a ship is flying the flag of a state that is not a party to the FAL, it will still be subject to the FAL regime in Barbados. And implementing the FAL Convention into domestic law therefore harmonizes this arrangement and ensure that we don't have this favored status being imposed upon ships that are not party, or states, sorry, that are not party to the IMO Convention. Mr. Speaker, it is also important when we look at the administration of the bill that the Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Port, Inc. shall be the General Administrator of the bill and will be afforded, and this will be afforded through the establishment of the National Maritime Transport Facilitation Committee. That is cited at Clause 6 of the bill, and of course 6.1 of the bill, which provides for there to be an established program for the National Maritime Transport Facilitation Program. The purposes of the program are outlined at Clause 6 of the bill, at 2, which talks about setting the standards. We talk about harmonizing the formalities, as I indicated earlier, the customs, the immigration, the health services, and quarantine as well. All those services will now be formally harmonized, and of course, creating a paperless system for the exchange of information, and again, reducing the number of delays associated with international maritime traffic. At Clause 7 of the bill, there is provision for a National Maritime Transport Facilitation Committee, and the role essentially is to develop a national transport facilitation program. Of course, that will be manned by a committee that will report to the port, the entity responsible for Clause 9 of the bill for implementing the facilitation program. It should also be noted, Mr. Speaker, that the port, at Clause 9(1)(f) of the bill, the port is responsible for developing and implementing a port community system. Essentially, what this system does is that it connects and continuously maintains multiple systems operated by the various agencies within the port community system. And again, this is about enhancing efficiency and improving, of course, trade and commerce within the country. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, has to do with what procedures are to be followed in respect of ships arriving in Barbados. Those are clearly documented within the bill. Part 3 deals with the arrival and stay of departure of the ships, and Clause 10 as well sets out the establishment of the maritime single window to facilitate activities by arriving, remaining, and departing ships. That's at Clause 10. The other issue that we have to pay attention to, and it has to do, and it's at Clause 11 of the bill, where it speaks to the procedures for ship owners or agents or ship masters to submit documentation in respect of the ships. Clause 11(1) sets out what is required in respect of the documents required, and of course, the approval for the flow of information between the single window and other electronic platforms or systems. It should be noted that once a ship owner or ship agent submits the relevant maritime documents in accordance with Clause 11(1), the documentary process is complete for them, that is the ship agent, master, or owners, except where there's a request to submit additional information in accordance with the Act. The maritime documents, of course, as I indicated, must be submitted to the JRCC, to the operations officer of the JRCC in respect of non-customs compliance maritime information, and of course the Comptroller of Customs in respect of customs specific information. The document also, the bill also sets out Clause 12. It specifies the maritime documentation as indicated by the FAL Convention and other IMO instruments within the port state documentary requirements. Clause 13, Mr. Speaker, further supports the expediting of the clearance of ships arriving in Barbados, and it sets out at Clause 13 those requirements. It also stipulates that where the ship owners or agent or master is not issued with a final certificate of clearance for arrival, the Comptroller shall give reasons for not issuing a final certificate of clearance for arrival to the ship owner. And of course, there are the forms, and the form is settled in Part A of the 6th schedule before the ship arrives in Barbados. Clause 14 provides for amendments of documents in respect of the actual arrival of ships into Barbados, where such needs to be done. For example, where information is submitted by the ship is no longer accurate. Clause 15 outlines the procedures in respect of the ships arriving for medical emergencies, and we will know, Mr. Speaker, that from time to time you will have such medical emergencies, and it basically sets out what is required for the documentation required in the event that the ship has a medical emergency. And we define a medical emergency within the bill at Clause 15, whether it is sick or injured passenger or crew member, or a person rescued at sea, or other persons requiring urgent medical treatment, or treatment against any notifiable disease. So that's all settled at Clause 15. Clause 16 also speaks to the maritime documentation required in respect of a ship departing Barbados. Of course, you have to have a notice of intended departure in the form of the 7th schedule attached to the bill. And in the case of a ship departing to a port within the domestic space, which is the CARICOM domestic space, 30 minutes in advance of departure, and of course in the ship outside of the domestic space, it says not less than 30 minutes or no more than 4 hours in advance of the arrival of the ship. Mr. Speaker, Clause 17 speaks to the final certificate of clearance for departure. That is also included in the 8th schedule to the bill, requiring obviously the timelines that must be followed. And of course, in the event that a final certificate is not issued, provision is also made in the for an electronic provisional certificate of clearance for departure. I'm just going through these sections, Mr. Speaker, to let it be known that in the case of doing business in Barbados and in the case of doing the ease of business, that notwithstanding all of the documentation might not have been completed, there's also an opportunity for the ships and their agents to do the follow the provisional requirements to ensure that those ships can come into Barbados. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that at all times we have the information, and that is why we have an electronic platform available. And of course, this electronic platform will lend to greater efficiency and also account for greater data in respect of the statistics that are required, and also be very, very useful to the agencies in respect of those matters. Mr. Speaker, I must also indicate that there are a number of fines required for those who do not follow the act when it's enacted. Of course, at clause 32, it speaks to the improper documents where a passenger or crew member seeking to enter Barbados from outside the port or departs from Barbados outside of the port fabricates or falsifies any passport, identity documents, seafarer documents, or other documents, that crew member or passenger is guilty of a fine, and of course, could be liable on summary conviction to a fine of 20,000 or to an prison of 12 months or both. The bill, Mr. Speaker, also addresses the issue at Part 6, 33.1, instances of stowaways or attempted stowaways to be reported. Of course, Mr. Speaker, you can never be too sure, and from time to time you will have some stowaways. But the important thing is that in accordance with the International Maritime Organization's conventions, and now embedded into our legislation, that a ship arriving into Barbados from a port outside of Barbados, and there is a stowaway discovered, as is probably contextualized in the bill, that the ship owner, the agent, or the master shall report immediately the discovery of the stowaway to the Chief Immigration Officer and, of course, the Commissioner of Police, and provisions made for that at Part B of the 4th Schedule. Now, that is important. But what it also goes on to, the point that the bill also goes on to make at Section 34, is that where the ship owner, the ship agent, or the ship master has reported the discovery of a stowaway or attempted stowaway in accordance with Section 33, or the stowaway or attempted stowaway disembarks the ship and is taken into custody of the Chief Immigration Officer, the ship owner shall be responsible for the cost of maintaining the stowaway or attempted stowaway. So it is not a cost to the government of Barbados, but it is also part of the IMO regulations, and we are seeking to codify that into the legislation. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to port state controls, I've been through that. I've made the point, and that's noted at clause 36 of the bill, that if you have a carrier, a ship in this case, or vessel as we prefer to call it, and that vessel does not carry the flag of the IMO state conventions, it therefore means that if they are flying another flag from a non-state party, then that ship also has to conform with the IMO regulations. So port state control is noted at Part 7 of the bill at 36. Of course, there will come a time, for whatever reason, the port state control officer has to detain a vessel. The procedures are settled at 39.1, where the designated lead port state control officer has to issue under Section 38 B, C, or D. That is, if the inspection, if he has to concentrate the inspection, if he has to expand the inspection, or more detailed information is required, that information obviously could lead to the detention of the vessel, but the port state control officer once they complete the final inspection and it identifies that the deficiencies have been corrected, then of course the vessel can be released, and it speaks to the procedures for the release of the vessel at clause 40. Mr. Speaker, this bill, of course, this part as well also relates to the application to cruise ships intended to come from Barbados to another port. I have outlined some of the penalties in respect of the act. There are additional penalties, of course, if there's submission of a false crew effects declaration as set out in Form 4 of the Convention on the second schedule, that the person or persons will be guilty of offense and liable for a fine of up to 500,000. Of course, those offenses related to the submission of false documents are set out at 42(1) of the bill, and it talks about the general declaration. If you falsify the general declaration, if you falsify the cargo declaration, if you falsify the ship stores declaration, the crew list or passenger list, then of course they'll be liable for a fine and or conviction or both in respect of the offenses relating to the submission of false documents. Of course, you may ask why this is important. It is important because in this day and age of human trafficking, we have to ensure that we are compliant with all of the treaties. We have to ensure that Barbados' international reputation is protected. We also have to ensure that declarations made to the customs and immigration are above board, and that is the only way we know it as a country to be developing our integrity, and therefore it is important that we ensure that we have the correct documentation. Of course, there's also other issues relating to the bill, confidentiality of data. Of course, this is where the Barbados Port Inc. will be responsible for securing all data. It is no difference when you have data privacy convention or laws, and this is all, of course, going to be done in terms of the port securing the data through the maritime single window. Of course, there is a requirement within the bill to ensure that the port shall keep record of all information for a period not exceeding 7 years. And of course, it speaks to conflicts and dispute settlement. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, is that the bill at section 49 makes provision for the minister to make regulations generally for the giving effect to this act. Of course, those will be prepared as required, and of course, through the process of consultation by the stakeholders involved, and of course by the port submitting to the minister and the ministry any regulations that are appropriate and necessary in order to ensure that we remain compliant. Of course, there will have to be consequential amendments, and that's the time schedule. And of course, there's going to be provision for the repeal of the Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic Act of 2021-33, which obviously will be repealed. And of course, the commencement of the act will come into being on the basis of the gazetted, on the basis of the bill being gazetted. Of course, Mr. Speaker, as I indicated earlier, we have a number of schedules to the bill. Of course, the first schedule speaks to the National Maritime Transport Facilitation Committee. It speaks to the appointment of members. There shall be a committee of 13 persons, obviously representatives from the Barbados Port Inc., one from the Port Security, one from the Port Information Technology Department, and of course one from the Port Corporate Department, 2 representatives each from the Port Health, Customs Department, Immigration Department, 1 from a cruise operator or organization, 1 from a local shipping company, and of course 2 persons appointed by the minister. The second schedule, which essentially is the 1965 Convention of the International Maritime Traffic, known as the FAL 1965 Convention. That also is going to be appended to the legislation as a schedule. And that's the second schedule. The third schedule will speak to the pre-arrival documents, all the issues that I've discussed in respect of the information required to protect Barbados as a jurisdiction. All those will be dealt with under Section 3, the third schedule. The fourth schedule, of course, speaks to the revised guidelines on the prevention of access by stowaways and the allocation of responsibilities to seek the successful resolution of stowaway cases. Those are properly defined at the fourth schedule. The fifth schedule speaks to the list of officers to whom pre-arrival and pre-departure documents are to be submitted. And the sixth schedule speaks to the provisional certificate of clearance for arrival. And the seventh schedule also speaks to the form of notice intended for the departure. There's an eighth schedule as well, again, which speaks to the whole issue of the form for a final certificate of clearance and departure. And there's the ninth schedule, which speaks to the list of officers to whom fines are to be paid for outstanding pre-arrival and pre-departure documents. And the 10th schedule, let me just get it here, the 10th schedule speaks to the consequential amendments, as I would have indicated not so long ago. And those are the schedules attached to the bill. Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased that we have come this far, recognizing that the audit, as I indicated in my earlier remarks, that the AMO conducted the audit in 2018. We're going to have, obviously, some corrections. We're going to enhance, obviously, our international competitiveness. We are going to certainly enhance Barbados' reputation as an international shipping nation. And of course, we are going to ensure that business can effectively be done in Barbados within a reasonable time. I believe a lot of work has gone into this bill long before I became minister responsible for tourism and international transport. When we have the maritime, the ministry responsible for maritime affairs and the blue economy. The port has also done an inordinate number of work. I must say that in respect of the single window, Barbados was fortunate to be in a position to be champion a lot of this work. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the officers at the Barbados Port Inc., who would have been involved in all the work that they would have done to bring this bill to a reality. I also want to thank all the stakeholders who would have been a part of this, including the immigration, the customs, and port health, quarantine unit, and others who would have contributed immensely to this bill. I also want to thank the Director of Maritime Affairs, I hope I got the title correct, who, I can't call her name on the floor of Parliament because they never gave you permission, Mr. Speaker. And I can't call the name of the CEO of the port and the other officers because I didn't give you permission. But I want to say thanks, a newbie like me, to these matters. Mr. Speaker, you can engage me in tourism, but when you come to shipping, perhaps I could be lost. But thanks to the officer, the director, she was able to provide me with a detailed briefing. I hope I've done justice to her briefing. She's been working, obviously, coordinating with the port and all the other stakeholders in respect of this bill. The officers in my ministry, they've also attended the AMO meetings. The last one was held last December. And of course, the reason why we want to advance this bill and get it out of the way following the break, the Christmas break, is because the requirement is to get it into the IMO this month. But we are happy that we were able to accomplish that deadline. And I also want to thank the Attorney General, officers within his ministry who would have worked, put in an ordinary amount of time to get this bill to where it is today. I really want to say thanks. And Mr. Speaker, I also want to remind those who are involved in shipping in Barbados that they have absolutely nothing to fear in respect of this bill. The bill basically allows them to work to build on what the port and the ministry and other agencies have been working with them to do, and that is to improve efficiency within the maritime space. We've come a long way, Mr. Speaker, as I indicated. We still have some work to do in respect of how we advance the work of this sector. It is clearly a sector that has great potential for Barbados. There's a lot of training that started, well, I shouldn't say started, continued last year and will continue well into this year in respect of seafarers. There's a lot of work that we are doing in respect of the maritime suite of legislation that we have to bring to Parliament. A lot of it, as I indicated, Mr. Speaker, would have started on the member for St. Michael South and his team at the time. And therefore, what we are seeking to do is to ensure that we make, in this particular matter, the provision for the electronic transmission of information in a very efficient way. But more importantly, we want to create that enabling environment that we refer to as a port community system. Mr. Speaker, having thanked, of course, the acting permanent secretary who's here, let me also extend my thanks to her. She would have been involved in the process, taking it through all the different versions and ensuring that we completed it, and therefore getting the matter to cabinet as well. So let me put on record, public record, our thanks to her and all the other officers who I mentioned. Mr. Speaker, this bill will do Barbados proud. It will do justice to our space, international space, but above all, it not only helps us to create that international competitive spirit, but it also helps us to conform with the treaty that we would have signed, United Nations treaty that we would have signed in respect of the creation of the IMO and obviously all of the responsibilities that we have to discharge under the International Maritime Officer. Mr. Speaker, on that note, I beg that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I want to begin by thanking the Minister for bringing this bill before the Parliament, sir. It is a very important bill, and permit me, sir, first of all, to say Happy New Year to you, to your family, to the members of the staff in the Parliament building, whom we have not seen for the year, and to the people of Barbados as well. I also want to begin, sir, by really where the honourable member who spoke before me ended, by thanking the staff, the Ministry of Tourism, for the amazing work that they would have done to get us to this point. I say so, sir, because we came in at a time when we had just received the audit, as the Honourable Minister said, in 2018. And Barbados fell down, I think, in over 20 areas. And it was clear to us that there were some things to be done to get us to a point where we could be proud of the maritime sector in Barbados, sir. And I also beg your indulgence, sir, to thank the staff at the Bridgetown Port primarily, under the leadership, sir. Permit me to just say just a few names. I feel so, they worked so hard with me, sir, and now with the Minister. Under the leadership of David John Marie, sir, the Bridgetown Port continues to perform extremely well. In this matter, sir, I feel particularly obligated to thank Captain Branch, Carl Branch, sir, for the work that he would have done to get us to this point, all things digital, and to take us here, and his team. And of course, as the Honourable Minister said, Ms. Najla King, who is now the Director of Maritime, and who, by any stretch of the imagination, is an amazing officer and would have done a lot of work in all these bills, sir. Barbados owes the port a debt of gratitude because I know this will transform Barbados, the way we understand it. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to set the context for this bill early. And I do so because I led this bill, or a similar bill, in 2021. And so that the public may not think that we are stumbling over ourselves, sir, I think it is important to note that this bill is very similar to the last bill we passed, sir, but to keep it tidy, there were some changes that had to be made and that are made in this bill. In fact, you may recall, sir, when we brought the bill, the reason that we paused it was to iron out some things in relation to whom would the ships be sending the information. We done all the work, but there had to be clarity in relation to whom the ships will be sending the final set of information, sir. And I will elaborate on that shortly. But, sir, we have to remember the context. We brought this bill at a time when we came to office, sir, in the face of the audit. That really was an embarrassment to Barbados. And not only was it an embarrassment to Barbados, sir, but it was clear that Barbados was missing out on vital opportunities to be able to involve all of Barbados, sir, into this particular process, sir. And we fell down in areas of legislation. We fell down in areas of administration. Generally, in terms of the attention that we were paying to the maritime sector, sir. And now, sir, I'm very happy to say that in many of those cases, a lot of those things are addressed. I anticipate that over the next year and a half, the Honourable Minister of Tourism will be very busy bringing to Parliament a number of pieces of legislation, sir, to right or wrong. But, sir, we must also set the context, sir, that this sector has a lot to contribute. And it remains one of those diamonds in the rough, to my mind, if it is that we continue to allow what is possible in the maritime sector to pass, sir. We, as a nation, sir, have a history of the sea. It's not a history of which most of us should be proud. We are an island. Most of us came here by sea. And as a result of coming here by sea, a lot of those pathways that we knew, sir, are now closed. Many of us do not have a relationship anymore with the ocean, sir. And it's something that we have to be able to reverse, sir. I believe that this bill is bigger than it says. This is about us taking command of our destiny. That is what this bill is about, sir. And the Honourable Minister for Tourism and International Transport was very clear in the way he delivered on the work that has to be done and the work that will be done and the details in this bill, sir. But I was also made aware, because I continue to follow the work of the port, that the Bridgetown Port won the American Association of Ports Awards for Innovation for the Maritime Single Window, as well as the Nevis World Inspire Award for this Maritime Single Window. So Barbados is leading again, sir. In fact, when I was Minister of Blue Economy and Maritime, I recall that Antigua has started some of this work. I don't know how far they've gotten, but I do believe that we are now ahead of Antigua too, and that Barbados is now best in class, sir. The Bridgetown Port, the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport must be thanked, sir, for this amazing work. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, I had said that there are a few things that I feel that I have to iron out between this bill and the last bill, sir. And as I said, we had to figure out what would be the flow of information when the ships come to Barbados. We've done the work, but the whole idea of this bill, sir, was to prevent the ships from having to submit multiple versions of the same thing, pretty much, to different organizations. There is no need for me to say that that would be inefficient, because that is obvious. And that inefficiency, sir, would not be to the benefit of Barbados, sir, and it certainly would not be to the benefit of Barbadians. And we had to figure out what would be the flow of information between those ships and the Maritime Single Window and other electronic windows, sir, that would have been created at the time. And I know that Cabinet approved Cabinet approved last year that flow of information, sir, and what that was going to look like. We had, sir, discussed with the Joint Regional Community Center, the JRCC, sir, how they should receive information. And in fact, sir, you may recall that around the time of the last World Cup, Cricket World Cup in Barbados, the JRCC was very actively involved in protecting people doing that level of work. So it is a system that was built, one that the country trusts, and it was important, and we felt that a lot of this information should come in through JRCC. I know that there had to be some time spent making sure that the systems at JRCC were as evolved as the systems at the port, so as to be able to be compatible. I am now of the view that JRCC must be ready, sir, to receive this information. And this would be in relation to non-custom specific information. In relation to custom specific information, sir, ASICUDA is also a system that we have built. And a lot of that information would go directly now to ASICUDA to allow those decisions to be made early. And most of this information, with the exception of port state control information, sir, would flow through those two systems. But we have to make sure that in relation to the things that we have to do for the IMO, that we keep a proper record of that, sir. Those things will go straight to the maritime single window. And at the time I piloted this bill in 2021, sir, that was not settled. And I want to thank the Honourable Minister for settling this very important issue, sir, because it allows us to be real. This is a real bill. And this is a really important piece of legislation before this House, sir. The other important factor, sir, is that none of us want ships to have the onerous task of repeating the same thing over and over. It makes a destination less appealing. And for a country that depends primarily on tourism, sir, a country that depends on cruise, an island that imports most of the things we eat, most of the things we wear, sir, you want ships to want to come to Barbados. And that allows us, sir, to improve the efficiency of the port. And I am happy to say, sir, that I believe the maritime single window will be the test case, but the best case. And that there will be nothing in the world like the maritime single window that Barbados built in-house, internally. We did not import consultants to build the maritime single window, so the Bridgetown Port built this maritime single window. And they should be commended for that. It says to us that Barbadians are capable of doing amazing tasks, unique tasks, if given the opportunity to do so. That we are a people, sir, that have always risen to the challenge when presented with a challenge. The other point, sir, is that I believe the schematics for JRCC must be known by now, and that we must be in a position to be ready. Because there is no point 2.5 years later bringing this back, sir, if we were not. I'm happy that we took the time, I'm happy that we made the changes, and instead of presenting a bill and amending the last bill and making it untidy, I'm happy to see that we're repealing that bill and presenting a new bill to this House, sir. But we must see this bill, sir, in the context, I believe, of other bills and other pieces of legislation, sir. Because I know Barbadians, if we talk about all that we're doing on the international landscape, and we do not talk of what we are doing in shipping, and we do not talk of what we're doing on the local scene, some people may get a little bit annoyed or anxious. And I also know that there's a shipping domestic suite of legislation that Cabinet had approved and I believe is now being drafted. And that would make it much easier for those who reside and make their money and their name and their trade in Barbados, sir, to be able to do business as well, sir. The Marine Transport Emissions Bill should also be before the House. In fact, a lot of this work we would have started, but the Honourable Minister of Environment, I'm sure when that comes, will have a lot to say. We discussed this bill over the weekend, sir. We looked at things pertaining to the maritime environment. We had conversations about the ballast water, sir, and what that may mean in terms of bringing invasive species to Barbados. We had a very detailed conversation on this bill in relation to the environment. And of course, the Honourable Member for St. Peter, the Honourable Minister responsible for Labour, will tell you, sir, that the CFERS suite of laws that we spent a lot of time working on, sir, at some point will come to this House, but that will not only make it easier for Barbadians to get work, but that it will guarantee that when they do, that they are protected by a country that respects and loves them, sir. And the Honourable Minister of Labour was very much involved in that process to make sure that we presented a final set of legislation that addressed the needs of Barbadians and protected Barbadians, sir, when they were on board these ships. Because if there's one thing that ships want, sir, it's certainty. You speak to anybody who's in shipping, they will tell you that they want certainty. They want to know in the event of an incident, what is the procedure? But they want to know if something should happen, to whom do they report? These things have to be clear, sir, and that is why this piece of legislation and the other pieces that are to come are going to be so tremendously important, sir. But why would I say all this, sir? The maritime single window corrects inefficiencies in submission. There is no doubt, I said it, the Honourable Minister has also said it, it is inefficient, sir. And you would have a situation, sir, where you have customs, immigration, port health, all these different players, sir, weighing in, sir. Now we have the opportunity to do a lot of this work in advance. Reduce the delays in the system, reduce the delays faced by the ships in a real way, make it easier for people to do business in this country. And ultimately, that is what we want. We have to make sure that it is easier for persons to do work in this country, sir. And why is that? Sir, shipping is a vital, vital industry. It is a vital industry. In fact, 90% of global trade, or about 90% of global trade, of about $380 billion, simply in freight charges alone, are as a result of shipping. Sir, that is a big industry. We have to make sure that we are top-notch players if we want to be anything. You know, when we are in other spaces, sir, you say go big or go home. And this is a version of Barbados going big. The marine economy is $730 billion, sir. These are big numbers because this is a big industry. So we have to get this right. We have to position Barbados as a serious mover and shaker. We talk about the hub, the Bridgetown Port being a hub. But if you want to be a hub, then you have to lift your game. You have to be quicker, you have to be smarter, the technology has to be on point, sir, and I'm saying every signal from the Bridgetown Port that they have every intention of being a serious player in this game, sir. It is, in my mind, the Bridgetown Port is one of the best-run state-owned organizations, if not the best-run state-owned organization in Barbados. And they continue, sir, to do very good things, sir, when you consider what it is that we have to be able to do. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, when I checked the financial statements of the Bridgetown Port in 2022 to 2023, for the year ended March 31, 2022, sir, it was $120 million in revenue. $120 million in revenue, sir. This is important. This is important. This means, sir, that when you have that revenue, sir, when you take out all the different things you have to take to look at what you have as net, you still have something, sir, to be able to make sure that the persons who depend on welfare have access to welfare. Because people must understand that all of our ministries are tied. And that there are no possibilities, sir, of us being able to deliver to the people who need delivery the most if it is that the productive sectors are not producing. And that ultimately, sir, is what we need. We need our productive sectors to produce. In the Bridgetown Port, sir, $120 million in revenue, sir, for the financial year 2022 to 2023, reflected in their financial statements ended March 31st, 2023. Sir, this is important. And that I want Barbadians to understand it in that context, because if you want to have new roads, if you want to have health care, if you want to make sure that welfare is available to the persons who need it, sir, or social support, regardless of how we call it, sir, if you want to make sure those things are available, somebody has to be able to pay the bills. And the Bridgetown Port continues to be one of the major payers of bills in Barbados, sir, but notwithstanding that, sir, you might recall and that this government, sir, has taken, even though this is a profitable entity, and even though this is a lot of money, you may recall, sir, that this government, sir, surrendered 10% of cargo handling charges, with an additional 7.5% to be surrendered, which translates, sir, all know to $10 million at least a year, sir, to reduce the cost. And I am saying, sir, that if the Bridgetown port and if the government of Barbados has reduced the cost, sir, of doing business, because ultimately that's what it is, that if the private sector players who are receiving these benefits, receive these benefits, but do not pass on these benefits to the people, that they are doing an injustice to the country, they are doing an injustice to the people of this country, sir, and we have a responsibility to stay on task and to make sure that these benefits are passed on to the people. Because where else in the world are you seeing a government surrendering this amount of money at a time like this? Governments all over the world, sir, cash in. This government making a decision to surrender a significant amount of the revenue to allow, sir, business to operate at a reasonable level, but that, if we are being honest, most of us do not feel that we are seeing those benefits being passed on, sir. And I say so conscious, obviously, of the fact that the base cost of these items have gone up in many cases, sir. So when you paid $10 for an item last year, perhaps you're paying $15. And sir, I'm saying so conscious of the fact that freight alone has gone up. If you bring in an item, sir, from China, I brought in some items, the Honourable, the CEO of the port, sir, the port charged me some extreme numbers. I brought in just some gym equipment. But my freight charges were decent. This year, sir, late last year, again, the freight charges on similar items, insane. So I understand that these things have gone up, sir. But if you are the beneficiary, sir, of the government's goodwill, that goodwill cannot live and die with you. Benefits should not go to the private sector and become some flower in a graveyard. These things have to be passed on to the people. And I feel it is our duty as a caring and responsible government to make sure that these things are passed on to the people, Mr. Speaker, sir. So that Barbadians understand that they have a government that cares, but beyond that, so that Barbadians can eat and live in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I do know we have limitless possibilities, sir. I do know. I also am aware, sir, of the difficulty in the supply chain when we had the blockage in the Suez Canal. And every day, sir, we are talking about the severe drought and the implications for the Panama Canal and what that is going to mean. We have to be consciously and constantly thinking about what it is going to mean for small island developing states. What it is going to mean for a country like Barbados, primarily that imports most of the things that we use. What is that going to mean? When we say that Barbados wants to start doing business with Guyana and with Suriname, that Barbadians should be able to grow food in these countries, or that Barbados could become the business hub of the region, some other country could be the entertainment hub, another country, sir, could be the food hub. If all of us do our part and CARICOM thinks as a CARICOM region, we will be able to survive all these things. But you know, we want to be lords of everything. You want to make sure that you have your country, sir. But sir, no man is an island, no country is self-contained. And that CARICOM must think as a CARICOM region. I am telling you, sir, that when we look out into the horizon, we can see what is about to happen. And none of us, sir, should find ourselves in a position where we are reacting to a thing that is clearly coming. We have to be able to plan for it, sir. Innovation, creation, risk-taking. These are the things that have now to be able to define Barbados. So we also have to have challenging conversations with our people. I remember when the Minister of Foreign Affairs spoke, sir, a few months ago, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs spoke about the war in Ukraine and the implications of the war on Ukraine on Barbados. And I read some of the comments, sir, as I am inclined to do every now and then. I don't do it all the time because I like to stay in a good mood. I mean, sometimes they can bring you down, they're so harsh. But Mr. Speaker, so I read the comments in relation to that thing. It was a very logical, in fact, an intelligent comment, a necessary comment. And then people are asking, what does Ukraine and Russia have to do with Barbados? But it has everything to do with Barbados, sir. And that I feel we have to have these conversations with Barbadians so that Barbadians understand, sir, that we are not living on our own. Somebody told me this morning we are not in a glass case. These things have tremendous implications for Barbados. If the situation in the Panama Canal is not resolved by God, it will have tremendous implications for Barbados. It will have tremendous implications, sir, for the cost of goods. And that unless Barbados makes it its business to do everything to become an attractive destination where ships would want to come and do business, you think they're going to force themselves into Barbados? They will go to some other island, some other country. It is important that we digitize the Bridgetown port and that they're doing that kind of work. It is important that we lift our standards to reach the IMO standards, sir, so that the audit, when we're audited, I believe the audit must be coming up soon. When we are audited again, even if we are not where we want to be, we surely cannot be where we were. And that is why these discussions that we are having are so important, sir. And Barbadians have to understand, sir, this is about food. The food that we eat comes in from the ships. This is about the clothes that we wear, sir. This is a day-to-day conversation for regular folk. This is not the exclusive preserve of those of us who sit in these hallowed halls, sir. This is a conversation for everyday people, Mr. Speaker, sir. And it is important that we pass this conversation on so that Barbadians understand it, sir. I know that in the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, for example, sir, I have asked in these estimates for an increase in almost everything. I've asked for an increase in almost everything. I hope we get most of it. But I feel that when we look at how our country is aging, that we have to build out facilities for older people. I feel that when we look at the climate change, sir, and how that is affecting Barbados, I also saw somebody ask, what does climate change have to do with welfare? What would climate change have to do with social assistance? Everything. Everything, sir. What if it is raining every single day? First of all, it affects the farmers. It affects what you have to eat. And if you don't have anything to eat, you don't have revenue, well, you're going to end up asking for social assistance. But if your house is leaking, Mr. Speaker, sir, and it rains every day, it's going to have implications for you. Or if it is that we have, all of a sudden we have freak storms and lightning storms, and a country that hasn't had a hurricane in 65 years is facing a hurricane, and every year we are hearing that these hurricanes are going to become more intense. We have to plan for it. Because if we do not plan for it, what is going to happen is that one morning we are going to wake up, sir, and find ourselves victims of a situation that all of us knew was about to happen and none of us prepared for. That is what climate change has to do with this, sir. I also feel, sir, that as the port builds out, sir, and we try to become more energy efficient, we talked about it in relation to the incinerator. I don't know where we are with that. But I also know we spoke about it in relation to being able to supply clean fuel to the ships. Because the story that this government is telling is a cohesive story. It is not a bunch of ad hocism, one person saying something else and somebody saying something else. Sir, if you were to try to weave this together, you find a story that makes sense, sir. And all of these pieces are connected. What is happening in the Bridgetown port, what is happening in the maritime sector, sir, is as important a conversation as what is happening on your day-to-day, in your day-to-day life in relation to what you are able to eat, what you are able to wear, the things your children are able to do, sir. This is a bill for everyday people, Mr. Speaker, sir. I also feel, sir, that, when we look at what is happening in the shipping space, sir, Barbados does not build ships. If you understand shipping, shipping is a highly capital-intensive industry. It costs millions of dollars to be able to build a ship. And I mean a proper ship. I am not even talking about a boat. So, but even now, as we try to build our boat building industry, we are seeing that it's costing us a lot of money even to build boats. But to build a ship, sir, this is a highly capital-intensive industry, sir. A new ship can cost millions and millions of dollars, sir. And we may not build ships, sir, but we want to put Barbados in a position, sir, where those ships fly our flag. So that you see a ship, sir, you see a big Barbados flag on it, sir, but you don't want it to be a position where they're carrying our flag because our rules are lax, or because Barbadians on board that ship, sir, are not protected. We want them to carry our ship because of the reverse, because the opposite is true, because we have built out our systems, because we have guaranteed them certainty, because we have become highly efficient, because we have become highly digitalized and digitized. Because they know that once an issue arises, that it will be settled promptly and fairly, sir. That is why we want them to fly our flag, sir. We may not build ships, sir, but Barbados must do more. We've done a lot of work, sir, to make Barbados an attractive destination, sir, for persons to come. We've been reviewing our ship registry. The ship registry has the potential to make Barbados a lot of money, sir. A lot of money. And I don't just mean money for some, I mean a lot of money for all, sir. For the roads, for healthcare, for businesses, for small business investment, for training. This is where, in my mind, sir, we should be placing our bets. But it means that we have to do the initial work, sir. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to ask ourselves what kind of country we want Barbados to be. At the end of the day, sir, small countries can hardly afford, sir, to do a lot of this kind of thing. Hardly afford to be involved in shipping, sir, if they do it inefficiently, sir. And Caribbean countries are known for being risk-averse. Caribbean businesses are known for being risk-averse. Caribbean people are known for being risk-averse. Barbadians, surely, are known across the Caribbean for being risk-averse. We're smart people, sir, but sometimes we have to be able to take risks. But it's difficult to take risks, sir, when the investment benefits, sir, people feel will not come back necessarily to them, and they're dealing with limited resources. We have to make these bets a little bit safer, sir. So as I close, I read in an African journal over the weekend, sir, that economic growth is the antidote for poverty. While that may be true, sir, I feel we have to amend that. Inclusive economic growth is the necessary antidote for poverty, sir. If you are able, sir, to make this sector real to the average Barbadian, sir, if we can tie it in such a way that the dots make sense, that when Barbadians see ships in the port, they're not thinking, oh, look how many ships are in the port, Barbados doesn't care about poor people. And reverse that narrative and say there's so many ships in the port that the Honourable Minister, sir, of Tourism and International Trade and International Transport, has been working so hard that he brought more ships, that we are able to have a summer business. If we do those things, Mr. Speaker, sir, and Barbadians see it as being real to them, then we would have crossed, sir, a very difficult moment, sir, but a very necessary moment, sir. Inclusive economic growth. As I close, sir, I want to commend the Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport for bringing this bill. I want to thank the team in the Barbados port, the Bridgetown port, for the work that they have done, sir, in getting us here. I want to thank the former staff in the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, sir. Permit me, sir, to say one last name, sir, Ms. Jacqueline Blackman, who was in shipping, laboring almost alone for a long time before this government came in to being. and strengthen that particular sector. I want to thank all of those people, sir. And I want to say as I close, sir, that all of these benefits, potential as they are, but realistic as they are, belong not to the government of Barbados alone, belong not to the Bridgetown Port alone, but that they belong to the people of Barbados, sir. With that, I would close, sir, and say I support wholeheartedly the bill that is before this House. I thank you.
Honourable member for Microsoft Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, in reviewing this Facilitation of International Maritime Traffic bill that is before us, it seems to me that the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport and the Barbados Port, Inc. are showing a tremendous amount of leadership in an area that, as an administration, this government has committed to bringing to the forefront and indeed putting at the center of everything that we do. The legislation is meant to enhance efficiency. It is meant to speak to the sharing of data. It is meant to promote the notion or the approach where an operator, and through this single window approach, where an operator does not have to present her or himself and their documentation 3 and 4 and 5 times to be able to facilitate a process. And that idea and that leadership is what really is meant to carry us forward in every area of what we do. From where I newly sit as the minister that's now responsible for efficiency, and I don't call the name of the ministry, I call the things that we are meant to deliver. Efficiency and facilitation and ease of doing business and the use of technology in ways that matter and in ways that make people's lives easier. And having that mandate, this legislation definitely, certainly, undoubtedly shows a tremendous amount of leadership. And I know that it did not happen overnight. But what I take from what this bill will be able to do once passed is a lot of guidance for what the ministry responsible for facilitation and technology must do, must continue to do. Now, one of those very important things is the idea that once you present yourself to the government, to the state, as a user, as a client, one time, that is the only time that you will have to make that presentation to the state. And I know that Barbadians listening must think that that would be a dream come true. That through a single unique identifier, that may be your ID number, that should be, once all the work is complete, a digital ID, that you then are able to carry that identity across a range of government services. Indeed, across all of the government services that you need to access. And I mention that because I consider that one of the most important things that we need to be able to deliver to the people of Barbados as clients of the state. But I realize that it will not be a simple question of just bringing effect to the technology or just bringing effect to the platform that will allow that to happen. It has to be a conversation. And I say conversation, not a fight or a quarrel. But it has to be a conversation. I spent some time over the past, feels like 5 seconds, but really it was about 10 days or so, with the data commissioner, who must be empowered, not just through the legislation, but through the resources that we put at her disposal, must be empowered to be able to carve out and to make Barbadians confident that the data to which the state has access to be able to deliver services for them and to them and on their behalf is protected, will be protected. And that is a key part of what the Ministry of Industry, Science and Technology will have to do and will have to continue to do going forward. But I say it's a conversation because I feel that we all need to be able to understand that there is benefit in joining the rest of the world in the 21st century. There is benefit. And that, you know, we are on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. Well, by saying Facebook, I'm dating myself because young people are not on Facebook, only the older people. And Twitter or whatever it's called now. I don't know, but people are still using Snapchat, I'm not sure. But we present our lives to the world. You know, I see sometimes people travel, and you know, travel influencers are a big thing, and people are traveling and they're showing you their boarding pass, and they're showing you which airport they're leaving from and which airport they're, and I'm thinking, but I'm not sure that this is wise. But we avail our entire selves, avail the public of our entire selves, and this is a global public. And then we are concerned when someone perhaps shares a piece of information or a set of information between one government department and another. And don't get me wrong, I believe very much in the importance of data privacy. The legislation that we have recently brought puts huge emphasis on the importance of data privacy. But it is possible to share data and to retain its integrity and the privacy thereof. We brought an entire piece of legislation and set up an entire office of a data commissioner to be able to do that. And why? Because we realize that every time you have to go to a polyclinic and fill out 4 forms, and then you have to go to a licensing authority and wait for 4 hours, every time that you have to go and present yourself to an entity of the state as if you are a brand new person, you are wasting time that you can be productive. The state and the country is losing that productive capacity that could otherwise be earning for you.
I remember hearing noise.
Sir, I'm willing to pause until it's...
Yeah, because I hear noise as if it is emanating from a cell phone. This is 2024. I hear noise, tremendous feedback from the cell phone that is disturbing to my ears. It really is. Here. Continue, I remember.
Thank you, sir. So the entire rationale behind the creation of a post of data commissioner in office, and I know that our colleagues who work in the private sector agree that this office must be well-resourced in order to do the very important work of ensuring data privacy so that we can have data sharing. I know that one of the efforts of government will also relate to an updated piece of statistical legislation and the creation of an independent statistics and data analytics authority. And why is that necessary? Because it is some of our very own existing legislation that is currently preventing the mere sharing of data from one government entity to another. So while we want to create certain benefits for citizens of Barbados in terms of us not having to present multiple times to several government entities, we also have to get ourselves in order to do that. Because as it stands today, there are clauses, there are bits of legislation, there are structural challenges that prevent the mere sharing of data today between certain government entities. And so we have to all agree to what we want. And the responsibility of the state is the protection of people's information. But when I talk about the conversation that we have to have, it is to agree that if we are to join the rest of the world in the 21st century, we have in some ways to be able to suspend our cynicism and to believe in the strength and the enforcement of the legislation that is there to protect citizens' privacy. We have to hold each other's hands to get there. Because this is, in the end, for our collective benefit. So this legislation also creates a paperless system for the exchange of information. And I cannot emphasize enough how much it is time to get rid of the paper that plagues us. You know, sir, when you print a receipt and give it to me, it immediately begins to lose value because of the fact that it will fade. In a little while, I will no longer be able to depend on that receipt to be able to give evidence of anything because the ink will fade and it will be a blank piece of paper. You know, the other stakeholder in the conversation is not just the state, it is not just the citizen, but it is also, importantly, the private sector. Most places that we go, we are asked, can I send you an email receipt? And there are quite a few reasons for that. I feel that if we are able to get to a place where we share things like receipts and other important documentations with clients in that paperless way, then their own record keeping has more value. That receipt as a record for them has more value for them as well as for us. Being able to substantiate financial transactions is a key part of what people need to be able to do. And I feel as well that it promotes a culture of evidence. I speak often, sir, about the idea of a culture of evidence. There's sometimes, you know, and my father will not be amused that I'm talking about him in this honorable place, but I will say to my father, who has gone to see a doctor, so what's the name of the person that you saw who gave you this particular advice? Or what is it that they wrote? Or what is it that they... And he says to me, she had on a hat. Or she had on a blue shirt. And I say, well, Daddy, I cannot use that evidence. If we are able to get to a place where we empower citizens, clients, And you'll hear me talk about clients because Barbadians, to the extent that we deliver services, are clients of the state. But if we are able to strengthen their own capacity to have and keep and understand the information that affects them, then that in itself is a critical service, sir, to be able to deliver to people. The question of the transferal of medical records, to be able to say, to move between specialists, to move from the hospital to the polyclinic. You know, there are certain jurisdictions, sir, in which you present yourself to any hospital, to any clinic, to any specialist in the healthcare system. And by just putting in a number, every record is available only to them so that they can be able to access certain information related to your care. Why is that important, sir? There are doctors in this honorable place. It is important to understand what medication a gastroenterologist may have prescribed that has contraindications for what a urologist may prescribe. It is important to be able to see that individual, that patient, as an entire person, to manage that case in a holistic way so that one does no harm to the patient, to the client of the system. Again, protection of data is critical in that conversation. And we should not, we will not advance to that place before we have sufficiently resourced the Data Commissioner and her office to be able to make sure that we are protecting people's information. But I want to say this as well. The fact that information is electronic does not mean that it is more vulnerable to being shared or being abused. I remember walking into a bank many years ago, and the paper form that the customer before me had filled out was put up against the glass. That's just how they chose to keep it. So the person fills out a form, they turn it over against the same glass that is looking out at me, and I can see exactly who was there before me. There are many medical offices in this country that ask you to sign to write your name down when you walk in. And I say respectfully, I am afraid not. Because whoever comes in, if I come in at 8 o'clock, whoever comes at 8:30, at 9, at 10:30, they will know that Marsha Cattle was there. I really don't think that they should be privy to that information. So the fact of a piece of information being electronic does not in itself make it more vulnerable to exploitation or to indiscriminate sharing. In fact, I dare say that paper is more vulnerable. Paper blow away, paper fall off a truck. All kinds of things can happen with paper. And so, as I begin this conversation with our friends and colleagues and constituents and the people that we humbly serve from this place, I want us to understand that we all have to find together a certain level of comfort to make it so that we benefit from the best of what is happening in the tech space in this year, 2024. Sir, as I begin to see the opportunities that my two colleagues before me who served as minister have started to help explore and create, there is a lot of reason to be excited about what is possible. This piece of legislation is more evidence of what is possible and what, in fact, this government is doing. There are those who are rightly concerned about issues of cybersecurity. And in the blink of an eye, this place will consider legislation that begins to look at what we can do to protect citizens and their information, what we can do to protect businesses, we must not be complacent in these matters. This is not something that happens somewhere else. You know, a couple years ago, we heard about a virus in a place called Wuhan that we thought had originated there. And I'm sure that many people thought, well, these things pop up all the time far away. No way that's getting here. And then we were made to eat our words. The matter of cybersecurity, as it relates to our capacity to share data and our protection in that regard, is one that I assure the country is at the forefront of my mind and this government's thinking and action as we begin this year, 2024. It will mean that we need to call on our friends in the private sector, the local, regional, and global private sector, to address this matter frontally. This is not a space where we want to be, where we can say, or we want to say, well, we are going to keep this among ourselves. As a matter of security, as a matter of national security, there are some things that will not be able to be the matter of public discourse. But certainly, the resources from which we draw to be able to prepare ourselves adequately must, of necessity, come from outside of the government. Because it is one of the most dynamic areas that we will have to confront and come to terms with. And I say that as a way to put on guard some of our friends and partners in the private sector to know that the government of Barbados will be calling on you to help us, continue to help us wrestle with these issues. So, sir, I wanted to just get some exercise in the sector and give my support to this legislation, which I am happy to highly commend to this honorable place.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I would wish to move that the House be suspended for the luncheon interval until 2 p.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until 2 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 2 p.m.